Welcome into the Tech Ed Podcast. My name is Matt Kirkner, and it is so great to have you with us for this particular episode. As our audience knows, this week and every week, we are securing the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent. Every week, we talk about the great opportunities in manufacturing, the way that manufacturing technology is changing at warp speed, and the incredible importance of making sure that we have a workforce that is ready for these awesome opportunities. As the job gets closer and closer to automation, for example, it becomes more interesting, it becomes better paying, it becomes safer. We are doing great things in manufacturing, thanks in no small part to the work of our guest and her company. The company and the guest probably need no introduction, but I will offer one anyway. I am honored to be joined on this episode of the Tech Ed Podcast by the Chief Executive Officer of Siemens. Her name is Barbara Humpton. And Barbara, thank you so much for coming by the podcast studio. It's so great to see you here.
Matt, it's great to be with you, and thanks so much for all you're doing to advance this discussion.
It means the world to me to hear that from you. It is indeed a team effort, and it is just amazing. We've got so many people pulling in the same direction, getting the workforce ready for these awesome careers, and the technology that you're working around, the innovation that's happening at Siemens, this just provides a perfect example of why we need more and more people thinking about these awesome careers. So let's talk about that technology. I mean, technology is evolving like crazy. We live in an exponential economy, products doubling in price performance every 12 to 18 months. That is certainly alive and well with all the innovation going on in manufacturing. Talk about the technology you're using and how it's making careers in manufacturing and the technology we use in manufacturing more accessible.
To rewind the clock just a minute, Siemens was actually founded in 1847.
Wow.
So
just a minute. We're rewinding it 150, 170 years.
I make this point to say, here's a company that is devoted to the technology that is in the backbone of the economy. In those days, it was the transatlantic cable,
right.
Get communication running.
Right.
Then it was, transportation systems. Well, fast forward to today. What's exciting today about the infrastructure that we need to build things and to travel and to live comfortably? That's what we're focused on. And so in the world of manufacturing, we've been focused on bringing the digital and the real world together, both the software and the hardware. What you'd find is globally, we're the number one industrial software provider in the world.
Wow.
And likewise, we're the number one automation provider in the world.
Amazing.
And so I say we have a huge responsibility, but what a great opportunity to help shape the future.
Well, you're right at the center of all this. And you think about, and we talk a lot of times about, it's almost blasé to talk about Industry 4.0 anymore, the fourth industrial revolution, but to have this company that has existed through all four of them, going all the way back to mechanization and steam power, back in the 1800s, and then we got to mass production and electricity, and then, of course, working with technologies like automation and computers even 20, 30, 40 years ago. And now we're in this age where our ability to acquire data, at the source, at the edge in manufacturing, use that data for all kinds of predictive uses to automate manufacturing, make these jobs really, really exciting. And I'm just a huge advocate as somebody who worked in manufacturing, led manufacturing companies for 25 years before getting into the education side, for these incredible opportunities that we have for individuals working in and around manufacturing. You mentioned the convergence. Sometimes we call it the IT-OT convergence, right? In the world of manufacturing, we used to have the operations people and we had the IT people, and never the two shall meet, right? I mean, those were two different groups of people. Now we've seen this incredible convergence in the world of manufacturing of IT and OT, driving things like the digital twin, as we talk about, being able to literally perform our innovation, test new products and processes in the digital world before we ever build the manifestations of those technologies in the physical world. So talk a little bit for our audience members who maybe aren't perfectly familiar with what the digital twin is and how it's transforming manufacturing.
Well, gosh, Matt, I mean, you said it so well. And if you ever want a job at Siemens, just call me.
Awesome. Yeah, I might take you up on that. That's a pretty amazing company.
No, you're absolutely right. So if we could create a digital rendering of a product or an industrial process, or maybe even the manufacturing line itself, it gives us that opportunity to examine it, play with it, experiment. Now, I met a battery manufacturer in the last year who said, I'm bringing battery manufacturing to the U.S. thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law.
Awesome.
And I said, have you used digital twins in order to model what your future factory is going to look like? He said, I'm doing one better. I'm actually building a physical prototype.
No.
And I said, I'd really wish that you would use the digital twin. We had a great conversation. I saw him 6 months later.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, Barb, how I wish I had heeded your advice. we actually built that prototype, but we forgot to put in any overflow areas. If you
Uh-oh.
know the battery
Yeah,
production
right.
process,
Exactly.
you create a slurry and
Yep.
it goes through a process.
Right.
And if any part of the system broke down, he had a mess on his hands.
Right.
Okay. So this whole idea of let's build and imagine and experiment, let's simulate, let's test. Think about the Mars rover.
Yeah.
And when NASA needed to land the Mars rover, they were able to do thousands of simulations to find the exact permutation, the exact combination that would yield a safe landing on the planet. And impossible to do in the real world.
Exactly.
But that's the power of digital twins. And now you bring those digital twins together. Imagine, sort of pooling all of our work in digital twins and actually creating digital environments. Oh, and then maybe using the photorealistic rendering that's now possible through the GPUs of NVIDIA.
Yeah, right.
Now we have this industrial metaverse.
Yes.
The ability to bring people together in 3D, working collaboratively on something in this metaverse that we've created together. The creativity applications are astonishing.
I get excited just hearing you talking about all that technology and the way that we're bringing it to bear. I always talk about in manufacturing, the scariest day in the life of a manufacturing engineer, the scariest day in the life of an industrial engineer is that day where you try to improve a process and turn the switch for the first time. Because if it works, awesome, you're like the greatest superstar in the planet. And if it doesn't work and you shut the line down or you shut production down or you can't ship parts to customers, now you're the biggest rat in the whole company, right? And so now with the digital twin, we have the ability to do all of that innovation digitally, and not just to digitally innovate, but to tie that to a physical asset in the manufacturing plant, pull data from it in real time, and allow us to experiment with opportunities to improve efficiency, improve yield, whatever it is that we're trying to do, improve safety, and do that in the digital world before we ever do that on the shop floor.
And to know that when you flip that switch, it's going to work.
Exactly.
And by the way, you can see it right here at IMTS.
Yes.
In the Siemens booth, we have some things that we're working on, a hot rod. We've got golf clubs. And in fact, they're being machined elsewhere in the show.
Wow, really?
By our partners.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you've got machining going on in one part of the show, and then you're actually watching that take place in the booth.
We've got the digital twin operating and people making decisions about what to do next.
Absolutely. And so we talk a lot on the Tech Ed podcast about this like really advanced technology, and you talk about something like a digital twin, and somebody maybe especially a small to mid-sized manufacturer, they're like, oh, won't it be great in 10 or 15 years when we have that technology? We have it now.
We have it now. And I've seen some great examples. In fact, at the Consumer Electronics Show for the past couple of years, the people we featured in our booth are actually small businesses who've embraced the technology in order to do something remarkable. And you could look back at former shows and you'd see a company, Space Perspective.
Okay.
How would you like to go to the edge of space in a capsule with 8 friends and a bartender?
Oh, there you go.
Lifted by a large hydrogen balloon.
Yeah.
It's been modeled and simulated, and that little company, Space Perspective, has been working on that dream. Then right next to them is Nemo's Garden, people doing underwater agriculture off the coast of Italy, where conditions are consistent year-round.
Sure.
Vertical farming.
Yep.
So small business after small business has said, I'm going to start with digital first. And I think what they're discovering is that, maybe not in the case of Space Perspective, but in the case of, say, vertical farming,
sure,
what's possible now is those creators can actually create the IP.
Mm-hmm.
They can package that IP, and others can go build the actual facilities. Now think about that.
Right.
Now you don't have to be the manufacturer, right? You can choose where you want to actually operate within the supply chain.
Well, in a lot of ways, that's got to be one of the most rewarding parts of your role, right? You're running this. What is Siemens now? $20 billion, give or take.
In the U.S., Siemens USA is about $20 billion, and yes, we're into everything.
And how many employees? 45,000.
You got it.
Yeah, awesome.
45 and 1 as soon as we hire you, Matt.
Oh, awesome! I get to be the 45,000th and first employee as long as I can keep doing the Tech Ed podcast every week. Maybe we can figure that out. Thank you for that compliment. But huge company. But yet you're talking about these small to mid-sized companies that are innovating at scale in ways that maybe a large company isn't or couldn't, or at least in ways that is consistent with how a company with a huge R&D budget could be innovating. Is that one of the many reasons that you get up every morning and love coming to work?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, actually, so at Siemens, we've got this view that the future is more global,
Okay.
right? Lots of global innovation going on, but local implementation.
Yep.
We have the sense also that the future is more networked and connected. And so what we're working on is how to make the technology that we bring into this field be easier to consume in many ways. One, the user interfaces. Can we make those as intuitive as our daily use of, smartphone applications?
Yeah.
If we can do that and make it approachable, make it easy for people to get into the technology. And then second, for companies, especially in those early stages, if we can make it accessible financially.
Okay.
So first step was, hey, we're working with large manufacturers, OEMs all across the country who want to stand up their own enterprises, have their own, server farms, et cetera. But what about the person who can't afford to do that? Well, making this available on the Siemens Accelerator platform means, hey, we host these applications in the cloud, and then we give people the ability to buy seats.
Yeah.
We've even are going as far as maybe providing the financing so that you get automation as a service, so that, okay, you're not going to have to make the capital expense, take that on your balance sheet.
Sure.
But instead, treat this as an operating expense. Get your workforce onto the new technologies and just grow.
Well, we had Asatosh Padi, who's the managing director of McKinsey, on the podcast about a year ago, and he wrote a book called The Titanium Economy. In that book, he talks about how 70% of innovation that happens in the American economy happens in small to mid-sized businesses, and particularly in manufacturing. And so certainly tremendous amount of innovation happening, with our larger Fortune 500 companies, but so much of that innovation happens with small to mid-sized business. And so how do we make that? I love that you said it's Glocal. Glocal, yeah. So we're taking these kind of global technologies and global innovation, but doing it at a local level, whether it's making a human-machine interface of some sort more accessible, more easily understood by somebody, for instance, working on a manufacturing shop floor, whether it's showing a small to mid-sized company how they can innovate. I love the idea of, if I don't have $2 million to automate a process, can I do that in kind of a shared economy model, or can I do that in a way that I can lease that equipment and be able to automate my process without having to invest, $2 million, $3 million of my capital, which I may or may not have, or may steal from some other part of the organization. So I love that view of it. Also on this whole idea of Glocal, I've been a big believer for a long time that manufacturing is going to move closer and closer and closer to the point of consumption.
Agreed.
And we're going to have way more, we already have so much choice in what we buy. And so we're going to have way more customization in manufacturing, having more personalized products manufactured locally. I mean, are you seeing or believing the same thing? Tell me about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And think about the things where personalization really matters, like in the pharmaceutical industry.
Sure.
Right? We've seen the technology already that can follow a product through its process. And the system, because of this new automation, the system itself can adjust and adapt and take the steps that are needed for that particular customized product. This is awesome.
It is.
I just saw Stan Smith this weekend.
Okay.
Remember the shoe, the tennis shoe?
Right.
Adidas, as it has the ability now to control almost the individual specification of the shoes that are made. It's eye-watering what can be done. But I think you're right. It's also necessary because we're all trying to tackle that sustainability problem.
Sure.
We're trying to tackle the supply chain problem.
Yep.
And so these are the technologies that are going to unleash us from things that have held us back in the past.
Absolutely. I say often on the podcast that one of the silver linings that came out of the pandemic, and there were certainly many, many hardships, but one of the silver linings is that our entire world now understands supply chain, right?
Yes.
Supply chain 5-10 years ago was something people like you and I would talk about in terms of managing suppliers, managing logistics, worrying about shutting lines down, worrying about quality issues, whatever. That was our problem, right? And then at a time when people could get what they wanted, when they wanted it at a price that seemed reasonable, nobody thought about the supply chain. And then all of a sudden, we recognized that, wow, we are part of this incredible global web, that if a few parts of this break down, we can create some real challenges for ourselves. Hey, global manufacturing isn't going to go away, and manufacturing is always going to find the lowest cost of manufacturing. But I think in this global world that we're living in, there's really, really great opportunities, especially for American manufacturing.
And let me pull the thread on
Please
that,
do.
because the technologies we're talking about make all of us more productive.
Right.
So if we can reach the point, I love this about this idea in American manufacturing. Everybody has said, oh, we can't get to the labor rates. Well, let me tell you the story of Hamburg, Germany.
Okay.
Siemens has a factory there.
Yep.
Where over the last, call it decade, they've increased their productivity tenfold.
Wow.
Right? And you look at that and you say, what's the size of the work? With the same workforce, 1,200 people today and 10 years ago.
In 10 years.
Tenfold increase in the output. Now, cost of labor is becoming a lesser and lesser factor in the whole economic equation, right? So as you're thinking about the investments to make, investments in productivity mean we have the ability to keep more in the United States.
Absolutely. Keep more in the United States, and we're going to talk about the workforce challenges, and there's a lot of solutions that we need to engage in here in the U.S. around workforce. But one of them is, as we see more and more individuals in the baby boom generation starting to retire and continuing to retire, and we see this huge gap in terms of the number of people that we need here in manufacturing in the U.S., a huge part of that solution is going to be automating. What's interesting is that, 5 or 10 years ago, and I've been speaking on automation for probably 20 years now, and you used to, every single time I would speak, I would get the robot's going to take the jobs question every single time, right? And it wasn't a question of whether it would be asked, it was just where in the question and answer period it would be. Nobody asks that question anymore. I think people are starting to realize that in order for us to have a robust manufacturing sector here in the United States, it's the backbone of our economy in so many ways. We have to automate because we're not going to have enough people to come into the workforce and be able to support all the jobs that are going to be open. And I've got to believe you're seeing it exactly.
We're seeing exactly the same thing. And, we haven't talked about AI yet.
Right.
But here's the really cool thing about AI. At Siemens, we're using AI to actually make the technology more approachable.
Awesome.
So a couple of ways. One is, as we go about our work, the main question is we're surrounded by data, all these data.
Right.
How do we make sense of all this?
Yep.
Turns out AI is better than any one of us as individuals at doing it, finding patterns, deducing, and helping to advise people about what to do next. That's great. We're using it that way. Same thing in a manufacturing environment. Once you've got the sensor network deployed and you've got all this data coming in, the next question is, how do I manage all this data?
Totally.
And so AI comes to the rescue. But the third, and this is really interesting, is now being able to provide a natural language interface to the machinery on the floor. And it used to be that, hey, if you wanted to be programming those CNC machines, hey, you had to know the language, et cetera, et cetera. I stood here at this show 2 years ago and had a conversation. Please sort the following objects according to color.
Yeah.
And the programming was done for me. In fact, then my team said, oh, would you like to write the code commentary?
Yeah, right.
They said, just press the button.
Wow.
And 5 seconds later, I have fully commented code, ready for deployment. And it's this kind of way of making us all more capable. I think this is where AI is a game changer.
It's so exciting, and I'm fascinating. Our audience knows we have an AI topic probably every other week because I've been fascinated with this topic. I want to pick up on the second point that you made with regard to sensor deployment, data acquisition, because this is quite honestly a question we get a lot from small to mid-sized manufacturers, especially. They're like, okay, I get Industry 4.0. I can have a smart sensor measuring anything from light to humidity to moisture to force to temperature to whatever. I mean, we can measure everything. That's awesome. I create this data set. What do I do with it? Is that I know it's part of the model, but help us kind of just bring it down to earth as far as we collect the data and now what's happening on the AI side to make that usable.
Yeah. So fascinating. We have seen AI deployed to actually solve those real problems that people are having. A classic one to focus on is, when is repair needed? You've heard that over and over again, right? Another one, which I found fascinating, is a customer who had an assembly line, and as items came off the assembly line, they were visually inspected for quality. And a person would put a little X on the thing. And if at a certain point, somebody would say, hey, we've seen enough of those that there must be a problem with the line. The line then gets shut down. And the customer had come to a bunch of consultants and said, how can you help me automate this? And firm after firm had come in and said, listen, to find one defect, here's the cost. To find 2 defects, here's the cost. I'll build you a menu.
Yep.
Our team went in and said, define perfect
Awesome.
We'll be using visual tools and AI so that anything that deviates from perfect gets flagged. And then you can immediately know whether you have a manufacturing problem.
Right.
And that engagement, you think about the ROI that's expected, right? When most times people ask, can I get a year or 2-year return on my investment? 18 months was
always my goal. Yep.
18 months is a goal.
Yep.
How about 3 months?
Yeah.
How about 6 weeks?
Right.
Right? Because that's the kind of impact we're seeing as we deploy this kind of intelligence to augment what people need on the floor.
Absolutely. Well, as somebody who grew up with the Toyota production system and with Six Sigma and finding variation in manufacturing and identifying anything that's less than perfect, but you could only employ so many manufacturing engineers, right? You could only put so many industrial engineers on a process to gather data. And so you may end up in a situation where, look, I've got to have 1,000 defects before I even worry about it because there's some other bigger problem. And now we can use AI, if I'm understanding you correctly, not only to find those anomalies in the pattern, so to create the pattern first, find anomalies in our pattern. So if I've got a full manufacturing line, I can pull that data. I get a distant early warning system that something isn't quite right. I can deploy my manufacturing talent, and I can take whatever my corrective action is, whatever my solution is, and force it right on that biggest problem. So we're now innovating and corrective acting at speed in a way that we never could before.
Never before.
It's such an exciting time. So I want to turn the conversation a little bit to workforce. And you and I were talking a little bit before we jumped on here about challenges in the workforce. I know there's a recent study by the Manufacturing Institute and Deloitte that was published just this year, talks about needing 3.8 million new employees by 2033. Manufacturing is starving for talent. When you think about, in as much as we can take AI on a manufacturing process and focus in on those 2 or 3 things that we can fix to improve yield and improve the process, give me 2 or 3 things in the world of whether it's public policy, education, employers getting involved that we need to do to solve for this workforce problem with the shortage in the workforce.
Yeah, and this is a great dialogue that's happening at the national level.
Right.
I don't know if you follow the National Talent Collaborative.
Sure.
But I love the work they've done in making recommendations on policy.
Okay.
Here's one of the things, right? We've got to break the cycle of thinking that everyone needs to have a 4-year degree.
Right.
It's not necessary. You know that as well as I do. And so the benefits that flow to people who are seeking college degrees, making those available to people who are seeking the kind of technical education that we know will help people in, that's key. Second, I think that we've got to solve the gender gap.
Yep.
And I hope you've interviewed Carolyn Lee of the Manufacturing Institute. If you haven't, I recommend her as a guest. So the NAM has this Manufacturing Institute. She is, as the CEO of that institute, is very focused on this. And just a brief statement she made once to me, I believe this is still true, that if we just closed the gender gap, we would close the talent gap across the industry.
That's incredible.
Wow. Okay, so what does it take to get more women interested in manufacturing? Well, a big part of this is breaking some of the patterns we've had. And here's where Industry 4.0 comes in.
Yeah.
What if we could bring flexible work into the manufacturing environment? People are not pieces of equipment.
Right.
We don't need to sign people up for shifts in order to make the most efficient use of them.
Interesting.
Industry 4.0 allows us to do some things asynchronously. Let's program the computers at a certain time, and then let's have people near the machinery when it's needed. And let's look at our schedules in a much more creative way to say, can we bring work-life balance and flexibility into the manufacturing environment? I think that's possible.
Absolutely. And I'm a huge fan personally of what I call work-life integration. That's not original.
No,
I stole
say
it
the
from
same thing.
somebody.
I call it the work-life blend.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's honest because going back 20 years ago, I would have people, you need to have a more balanced life. You need to leave at 5, you need to whatever. And I mean, family was important. Things like physical fitness is important. All those things were really, really important. Work was really important to me. In fact, that was where that was my fun, right? I mean, I had the most fun running companies, solving manufacturing problems, working with customers, all those kind of things. And so, it's not right for everybody, but in all of our companies, we're huge advocates for work-life integration, which means if you want to go running at 1:00 in the afternoon, go for a run. If your kids are in the music thing at grade school, don't ever miss that, right? Never find a way to never sacrifice those really, really important things in your life.
Do what needs to be done when it needs to be done.
Exactly.
Because there are a lot of things that can be done virtually now.
Exactly. So let me ask you this. I mean, that's in our companies, which are, orders of magnitude fewer employees than the one that you run. I think it's probably a little bit more easy to facilitate some of that. Is that a challenge in a large company like Siemens to
It
do that?
is, but I'll tell you what I've been looking for, and I'm finding them all across Siemens, is the leaders who get it.
Okay.
And so a leader of a manufacturing facility who recognizes that, wait a minute, I can break this cycle.
Right.
But now what it requires, and again, this is where we need to think really deeply about what is that union relationship?
Right.
Because,
For sure.
sometimes our contracts lock us into things that
For sure.
don't make a heck of a lot of sense.
Right. For either side. Right.
For either side.
Yeah.
So let's go question those things
For sure.
and let's go rework the approach so that we do unlock opportunities for the talent that we know we need to bring in.
Couldn't agree with you more. And so we find ways to create flexible opportunities at work. And we started that as kind of a gender conversation. That's good for every employee, right? Is the more flexibility we can have. But I want to stick on that gender point for a moment. And obviously, having risen to the level you have in Siemens and the example that you've set for so many women in terms of how you can lead an incredible manufacturing company, do it effectively, do it confidently. I mean, you really, I'm not the first person to tell you that. You're blazing a trail and setting a great example. Tell me a little bit about that journey and maybe some of the challenges that we, especially in manufacturing, create for women who are trying to advance in the organization.
Well, listen, I've had a 4-decade career now. I'm working on my 5th.
Yeah.
And when I got started, the expectation was that leaders looked a certain way, behaved a certain way, right? The job of education and the job of people who think about development was to mold people in the image of whether it was, the 12 characteristics of a leader,
Right.
and
Yeah.
you're going to
We've
rate
all
you
read
on
the books.
or
Yeah.
they're going to rate you on a scale of 1 to 10. Are
Right.
you a 100-point leader? Or are
Yeah.
you somewhere in the middle? And I didn't fit that mold, right? I was too nice. I smiled too much. I was curious, enthusiastic, energetic. It's like
I agree with all that, by the way. I mean, everything you're telling me. Yeah.
right. And so the thrill I'm having right now is that the business world has changed
Interesting.
and has recognized that, oh no, that leaders of all different sorts can have impact. And so it's all about impact.
Sure.
Really, that's the real question to ask.
Of course.
And so I will tell you that throughout my career, that because I was told I was not executive material,
Huh. People
I just
literally said that too.
literally
Wow.
said, yeah, you may have aspirations, but I don't want you to be disappointed, but I just have to tell you, I don't think that's in your future.
What a shame and a disservice.
Oh, Matt, I mean, I do tell a story about at a certain point in my career, being called into a boss's office and being told the job you have right now is a great learning role for a future CEO. And so we'd like to ask you to step aside. So one of our CEO talent pipeline.
That's a true story.
That is a true
It's
story.
incredible.
Well, and it turns out it really was a great training ground.
Yeah.
I mean, because the things I learned before I was asked to step aside were life-changing.
Huh.
And now, now Siemens recognized that I had something to offer that was, in fact, differentiated.
Right.
And I do something that others in our organization don't.
Yep.
And they're free to do what they do well. And I'm going to do everything in my power to advance the goals of the organization.
Awesome.
So, I mean, my advice to folks right now is to find what it is that you get to do day to day, where you do it on vacation, where you lose track of time because you're in the zone and having fun. Once you can identify for yourself what kind of work gives you that, do more of it.
Right. That was a lesson that I had to learn over time, right? Because you have, going back 20, 30 years ago, whenever it was, 40 years ago, and you have this vision of what a corporate CEO is. And believe it or not, I knew I wanted to run companies from the time I was like 11 years old. Like I wanted that job, right? So I knew that, but you have this certain paradigm about what that person is. And then you realize that you've got certain personality traits, myself in particular, that lent themselves really well to that.
Yep.
And others that, frankly, like attention to detail and some of that stuff that you need somebody worrying about that stuff, but wasn't my gift, right? And so what I realized that there isn't really one mold for somebody who leads an organization, right? It's all about what you just said, which is taking your unique gifts and what it is you're naturally good at. And what I find is the things that I'm naturally good at, and I think that in general, the things that people are naturally good at are the things they enjoy, and vice versa. And the more they enjoy them, the better they get, and the better they get, the more they enjoy them. And so you figure that part of it out. And then rather than spending all this time trying to mold yourself into what you think should be, a successful CEO, let's take the things that you're naturally good at and then have other individuals on the team that offset maybe some of the things you're not quite as effective at. And it sounds like you're saying the same thing.
For me, it was a late aha to realize that people in my organization wanted to be asked to do more.
Yeah.
And, I realized Roland Bush, our global CEO, when he'll say, Barbara, would you represent me at this upcoming meeting? Nothing makes me feel better than, hey, I'm trusted to do this and do it well.
For sure.
And I want to give that same gift to the people around me. And
Totally.
so often people will ask me, Barbara, is this a stressful time? How do you sleep at night? And
right.
my answer is, have you seen my team?
Yeah.
They're spectacular.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I can attest to that because I've met several members of your team as we were putting this particular episode together, and they are a spectacular group of people, and that is really, really important. And there isn't any, as a leader, you can rise to a certain level doing it all on your own, but at the end of the day, it's the people that you have around you that make all the difference in the world. And so that's
and make it fun.
Exactly. Yeah, make it fun. And it's interesting as you're saying that. I think that message resonates especially with millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, and we find that in our organizations. Everybody for years, and I sit on all the the manufacturing best practices groups and so on, and everybody's like, well, this younger generation, they just they're not willing to work as hard. And I'm like, that is just not true. You just have to create a culture in which they're willing to flourish, and all the things that are able to flourish, and all the things that you're talking about, which is making them feel like they're part of mission, make them feel like they're about something bigger than themselves, because they are, not just because you made it up, because you're literally doing really, really important work. And what we have found in our organizations is if you can give them that independence to flourish in the way that they want to flourish, and then the guidance to kind of work them through that process, it's absolutely unbelievable what this next generation of employee is going to be able to do.
Well, it's got to be easy in your line of work because you are truly getting the future ready.
Yeah, trying to, for sure. Absolutely.
It's very easy in our line of work because Siemens' whole business strategy is built around these global megatrends: climate change, urbanization, the aging demographics of people everywhere, et cetera. And so when you look at that, you realize, yeah, people want to work on the problems that are truly changing the world.
Exactly.
And Climate Week is coming up. Our team will be all over that town because we have a lot to say, to teach, to contribute to the dialogue about how we're addressing this existential threat. And so, the worlds of manufacturing, buildings, et cetera, this transportation. Just yesterday, we announced that with Leader Schumer, that we'll be manufacturing high-speed rail cars.
That's awesome.
In the state of New York, Horseheads, New York. So I think that when we engage, in meaningful work, it's no question that this next generation, I've just met they identify themselves as next gen. Two of our employees who are here at the IMTS show.
Awesome.
Who are having the chance to scout around. And I'm about to go to the student section and get a chance to see, hey, what does this future hold?
Incredible magic happening there. And you're having quite a week. So you get Senator Chuck Schumer, and then you get the Tech Ed podcast all in the same week, which is absolutely incredible.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and we haven't had Senator Schumer on, although we did. He co-sponsored the Chips and Science Act, as you probably know, with Senator Todd Young. And Senator Young joined us about a year or so ago to talk all about the Chips and Science Act. And I think, they really, through that act, bipartisan, and they worked together on it, set an example in many ways of how we can invest in education. Significant amounts of the Chips and Science Act being invested in education. I want to talk a little bit about your efforts in education, starting with, that high school level, right?
Yeah.
Because we can talk all we want to about millennials, Gen Z, amazing people rising to the CEO of a $20 billion company. None of that's going to happen 20 years, 30 years from now if we don't have that next generation that is fired up and excited about careers in manufacturing.
You got to get started.
Yeah, tell me what you're doing in the high schools and kind of how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, we have a lot of different programs and I think what you'll see on display here at IMTS is this outreach that goes into student settings, bringing the actual technology in so that kids get hands-on with the technology. They have a chance to compete. I think that competitive environment is so important.
Totally.
And then, what we enjoy doing is participating in challenges. Let's say the Association of Mechanical Engineering.
Sure.
Right? And the challenges that they'll put on. Siemens is often proud to co-sponsor along with other large organizations challenges that get the creativity of these young people going. And then it raises awareness. It gets people comfortable with the idea that, oh yeah, this isn't the dark, dirty, dangerous manufacturing that we always used to know. And no, this is a new tech sector that's under development.
And I'm glad you brought that up. We talk all the time about students who are interested in careers in technology. And if you look at the surveys that are done of millennials and Gen Z, when we look at the studies that are done of the individuals in those generations and what they're looking for in career opportunities, almost all of them are saying, like 80% are like, I want to work in tech. And by tech, they're talking about, Meta or Apple or SpaceX or whatever, all of them absolutely technology companies. We have a huge message on the Tech Ed podcast, which is if you want to work in tech, come to manufacturing. I mean, you look at the kinds of technologies that you're working around day in and day out. We've talked about smart sensors and smart devices, digital twins, human-machine interfaces, robotics, automation. I mean, manufacturing careers are tech careers, right?
They are. And let me give you a proof point.
Yep.
Think about what we classically consider to be Silicon Valley tech.
Right.
All of those companies, whether it's NVIDIA, whether it's Microsoft, whether it's Salesforce, whether it's Sony with building headsets, they're all wanting to partner with Siemens. Because what we all recognize is that the Internet of Things is orders of magnitude bigger than the Internet of People.
Right.
This is where the next big digital breakthrough opportunity is.
Absolutely.
So manufacturing is where the action is. It's why these companies that are partners are putting so much investment into understanding the manufacturing domain so they can understand how can they bring value to the table.
Absolutely. You bring up Microsoft, and we had Mary Snap, who's the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for Microsoft, on the podcast. I think that episode aired probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we had exactly that same conversation. In fact, they're making a $3.3 billion investment in Southeast Wisconsin right now, huge data center, and then tons and tons of educational initiatives. And I asked her why, and part of the reason was, she said, in Wisconsin, there is a spirit of innovation in the Midwest that I think a lot of times, we're flyover country, but a lot of times people don't realize how innovative the Midwest can be. But the other thing she said is there's this huge concentration of manufacturing, and pointed to all the innovation that's happening around the Internet of Things, around IoT in manufacturing, and how in many cases manufacturing is leading the rest of the world into the digital age. And it talked about how Microsoft wants to be right in the middle of that. So sounds like you're seeing exactly the same thing that Mary is.
We're seeing exactly that. And so I'll just take it one step further and say, we are defining a new tech sector. This is different than what you see in the entertainment domain or in our communication world, in our retail, consumer world. This is a tech sector where you see technology with purpose.
Yes.
If you get in now, you're in on the ground floor.
Yes. Totally. I mean, that is, first of all, technology with purpose, and you start thinking about all these megatrends that you're talking about, and whether that's climate change, whether that is the global supply chain challenges and the opportunities to bring manufacturing closer to the point of use. I mean, sustainability. I mean, all of these different challenges that we have around the globe. We have a whole generation of young people that are excited about being part of something bigger than themselves, and we're talking about not just doing technology for technology's sake, but doing technology to make the world a better place, to make better products, to make better solutions, to hold prices where we want to hold prices, to drive the economy forward. And it really is a totally different message. And then your whole idea of getting in on the ground floor, right? I mean, who wouldn't have loved to invest in NVIDIA maybe 3 or 4 years ago, in Apple or Microsoft decades ago, and recognizing all the growth and all the wealth and all the opportunities and freedom that come from that. And here we are in the world of manufacturing at that same ground floor. And so for a young person that is excited about technology, that wants to work in technology, here we are at basically the gates of the future of manufacturing, and you're helping to lead the charge. What message do you have for those high school students as they're considering these careers? You're in at the ground floor, you have these great opportunities. When you go out and talk to high school students and talk about, both in general and in high school girls about opportunities in manufacturing, what is that message?
For the girls in particular, the message is you are enough.
Awesome.
I'll tell you this quick story.
Yeah, please.
We had a meeting at our research and development headquarters, Siemens Technology in Princeton, New Jersey.
Okay.
We invited in local professors, Rutgers, Princeton, et cetera. Brought in this group, and I was invited to sit at the table with them for a roundtable discussion on what are the skills needed for the future.
Okay.
And I'm expecting, all kind of highfalutin data science, quantum
Right.
physics,
Yeah.
this.
Right.
No, curiosity
Mm-hmm.
and initiative.
Awesome.
If you can get curious
Yes.
about what's happening around you, and then it's not enough to sit on the couch and be curious about it. You got to take the initiative to get out there, get engaged. If you've got curiosity and initiative, the world is yours.
So you and I were talking a little bit earlier before we started recording about this report that we just did, particularly in the state of Wisconsin around AI in Wisconsin. And we went to numerous employers all over the state and asked them a number of questions to get a sense for AI readiness in the world of manufacturing and across every sector of the economy, and then public policy wise and what we need to be doing in education and supporting it with government initiatives and so on. One of the questions we asked was, what are those personality traits that you're looking for in terms of people leading your AI initiative and participating in your AI initiative? And right there on the top 3 was curiosity.
I love it.
When you think about it, it really makes sense, right? These are emerging technologies. We're figuring it out as we go. We've got to come up with new applications and new ideas, and just being curious and kind of following wherever that goes. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Okay. So, and think about the prior industrial revolutions, right? They all had a start and an end, in essence, right?
Right. Yes.
What we're into now,
Yes.
I think, is actually an infinite industrial revolution.
You know what? I love that, and I'll tell you why. 2019, I write Gardner Business Media, by the way, huge presence here at IMTS. I write monthly magazine columns for several of their properties, production machining, products finishing, and have been for 20 years. I wrote a column in 2019, and it was Infinity 0.0.
I love it.
And I said, we are in the world of infinite industrial innovation. There won't be an Industry 5.0. It is just going to continue to change. We're going to see evolution and revolution in manufacturing technology that's nonstop. Yeah, I almost got goosebumps as you were saying that.
And that's why curiosity and initiative for life.
Absolutely.
Right? Because don't expect that you're going to go through a program and that's it.
Exactly.
Be ready now to learn. Now, I myself had just finished a Coursera course on blockchain.
Awesome. Yeah.
And, doing some online learning about quantum. These are the things that are right on the horizon for us.
Absolutely.
And man, it would be so cool to be starting instead of into my 5th decade. I wish I was just starting now.
Yeah, I wish too, but I also kind of look at it as we've got another 2 or 3 years of this, or 2 or 3 decades, I should say, of this. And at least for me, I mean, I'm going to be working until I'm in my 80s.
I've warned my children I'm living to be 120.
Awesome. Yeah. And honestly, with AI and advancing medicine and some of the things that we're seeing out of the healthcare world, I don't think that's too far of a stretch, actually, for people. In my case, 55 years old, to be able to have an opportunity to live to be 120. I'm kind of planning on it.
Matt, I'll see you in the future.
Yeah, awesome. We'll do like the 18,000th episode of the Tech Ed podcast when we're 120 years old, both of us. So I want to talk a little bit about your personal journey as well. Tell us a little bit about maybe what your career plans were initially and how they morphed over time.
I'm the daughter of 2 math professors.
Awesome.
And I was convinced I was going to be a math professor like my parents.
Where do they teach, by the way?
My dad taught at the Virginia Military Institute.
Okay.
And my mom couldn't teach in town because they were both, the Washington and Levi Meyer, both the 2 colleges in Lexington, all male when I was growing up.
Wow.
And so she went down the road to Southern Seminary Junior College for Women, and then later to James Madison University.
Awesome.
But I went to Wake Forest University, studied math, thought I was going to go do that. But senior year, IBM came to campus, and I said, you know what? I want to see if I could get a job.
Right.
And I got offered an opportunity to be a software developer working on a classified program that was critical to ending the Cold War.
Wow.
And Matt, a moment came during my career, those early days, and all the programmers were invited to come into the conference room where the chief engineer said, I want to thank you all for the work you're doing. Last weekend, a fighter pilot was shot down in enemy territory. This was in the Eastern European wars. And
okay. Can I ask about when?
Late 1980s.
Okay.
This would have been.
Yep.
And he said the pilot was shot down. Our technology was used to help find him.
Wow.
And ensure that he was extracted safely. And then he said the words that cemented my career. He said, that was my nephew.
Whoa. Wow.
And I want to thank you for what you've done for my family.
That's incredible.
And that's when I was hooked. I was like, wow, this isn't amorphous. This isn't abstract. This this technology is transforming lives.
Right.
I want to be part of this. Now, my mom, I was several years into this, and my mom said, "Are you ever going back to graduate school?" And I said, "I think as long as I'm having fun, I'm going to keep doing this."
Yeah.
And I may go back to graduate school at some point,
Right. But still planning on it at some point, right?
But man, having a blast. So I had the privilege of working on technology problems, like the global positioning system, the ground control that drives the constellation, that makes it possible for us to have this amazing utility, which today, could you order a pizza without GPS, right?
Right. Exactly. You'd never find your house. Yeah.
And then had the chance to work with Customs and Border Protection on post 9/11 on the systems that would help us assess risk of cargo as it crossed the border.
Sure.
Then soon after that, worked with the FBI on biometrics.
Oh,
and literally, I introduced the FBI to rapid DNA analysis. And I heard, as I had already started my career at Siemens, but I heard testimony of the FBI director, James Comey at the time, talking about this capability and how it had transformed law enforcement.
Wow.
So what gets me charged up is the power of technology to accomplish the really important things.
Absolutely.
And now to be offered the chance to be at Siemens, where it's not national security, it's global security we're talking about. It's a true privilege.
Well, and knowing, I mean, you have the joy of doing the incredible work you do, changing all the lives you do, but also knowing that, you're taking the knowledge that you've gained over the course of an entire career, the technology you understand, an incredible group of people that's doing amazing innovation and literally using it to change the world. I mean, that's not an understatement. That's what you're doing every day.
It's not an understatement.
I want to talk about that innovation, and let's, Barbara, turn the clock forward a little bit. And let's say that it's not quite, our 120th birthday, but it's 10 years from now, and we're sitting here having a follow-up on this podcast and looking back at what we talked about today. What technologies and applications and blow your mind kind of things are we going to see 10 years from now that we maybe aren't dreaming the way we should have today?
One of the things I'm excited about is true distributed manufacturing.
Okay.
We've all seen the platform revolution, right? Imagine a marketplace, if you will, where creators, inventors can actually publish designs.
Yes.
Where then producers can bid to actually make those close to the point of the consumer who actually needs it. And maybe the best example we're going through right now is as we transform the vehicle space.
For sure.
And internal combustion engines are going out of style and electric motors are coming in. Do the OEMs really need to manufacture spare parts for the entire fleet that's out there today? What if you could actually make replacement parts on demand? That is possible today.
Yes.
But we've got to build the connectivity that makes it happen. Now, that happens then with the power of, first, the digital twins. Mm-hmm. And you've got to be able to protect that, right? So we've got to be able to, provide the secure platforms that protect the IP of those creators. But it also requires the software-enabled automation. The software-defined automation makes it possible for us to send the instructions for how to make.
Right.
And then it requires data and AI. We've got all the building blocks within our reach right now. And when we talk in 10 years, we're going to be amazed. You're going to be showing me the shoes that you had just had made for you.
Yep. Yeah, I'd love that. Yeah. I mean, you think about, okay, so I've got a car that is predicting its own future failure before I ever predict it. It'll be autonomous, so it'll drive, maybe I won't even have to be in it, but it'll drive itself to the service station. And on the way, we'll be manufacturing the replacement part for whatever the problem is with that particular car using all this incredible technology. I mean, it's just, I couldn't think of a better time in human history to be alive and to be doing the kind of things that you're doing. It's really, really awesome. I want to ask you one final question, and it's a question we love posing to every one of our guests here on the Tech Ed Podcast. We're going to take you back in time to when you were still dreaming about maybe being a math professor. And I got to believe you would have been an amazing one. But the world's a better place for all the incredible work you're doing now, without doubt. Take me back to that time when you're a 15-year-old sophomore in high school. And if you could go back to that point in time and give yourself one piece of advice, what is that?
Don't fret. This is going to be an amazing ride.
That's awesome. I love that. In a sentence, don't fret. This is going to be an amazing ride. It has been an amazing ride for you, Barbara. It's been an amazing episode of the Tech Ed Podcast. Can't thank you enough for stopping by and spending some time with me.
Matt, it's been great. Thank you.
So what a great conversation we had with Barbara Humpton, the CEO of Siemens. I can't say enough about how amazed I am by her energy, her passion, and her optimism for the future of technology, not just in manufacturing, but across the entire economy. I want to thank our audience for joining us as well. We had all kinds of references that came up that you're going to want to check out on the show notes. We have the best show notes in the business. You will find those at techedpodcast.com/Humpton. That is techedpodcast.com/HUMPTON. And as always, don't forget to check us out on social media, whether you're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Doesn't matter where you go for your social media, you will find the Tech Ed Podcast there. Please connect with us. Let us know how we're doing. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to hear you and see you next week on next week's episode of the Tech Ed Podcast. I am Matt Kirkner. Thank you so much for being with us.